Servus and hello. Matthias Eichler here, and this is Singletrack. This week I chat with Jack Rosenfeld from Seattle, podcast co-host on the Beer on the Run podcast, race director with the Seattle Running Club, and 200-mile race finisher. Oof, amazing. We talk about failing 100-milers, then walking to success at the Cowboy 200 in Nebraska. We talk about the challenges and joys of being a race director, and we talk about trail culture and how our little world is changing in the light of big businesses entering and new voices challenging our status quo. Before we dive in, one more invitation to our upcoming winter race, Saturnalia in Olympia. Festive 10K just a week before Christmas. And we just opened registration for our little backyard adventure. To our 6-hour race, we just added a 12-hour option. That's going to be happening in May of 2024. Find all the details at rockcandyrunning.com and join us on the trails in Olympia. Oh, and one more note. If you feel a bit out of the loop after listening to this podcast and want some background info, visit my blog, electriccablecar.com, where I post almost daily updates on the developments on the trail, ultra, and mountain running world. There's lots going on. There's a lot to cover. All right, let's hear from Jack. All right, Jack Rosenfeld, you were on Singletrack many moons ago. You invited me onto your podcast, and I've been very, very tardy and have not returned the favor. Now you're on Singletrack. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Obviously, it's just half of our show, Beer on the Run podcast. Clint Welsh is a good friend of mine and my co-host for the past 3 years. But I also, I think the weird thing about doing a podcast that is like co-hosted, we're still two separate individuals, right? So it's kind of like, we both have our own lives, our own running lives, our own personal lives. We just have a split show, a shared show where, we make a good tag team where it's kind of like one person feeds the other person type thing. But no, I appreciate you coming on our show and then also having me here as well.
Yeah, no, I love these shows where two people regularly meet up because I think you have a continuation of a conversation, right? This sometimes can very much go off the rails because there are too many insider jokes and stuff, right? And people are listening are like, especially new people, I need sort of a little like Cliff Notes guide on like what is going on in this show. But in general, I think you anchor it really well. And I love the fact that you come from two different regions geographically too, right? I mean, it's actually good to have sort of separate lives that enriches the show, right? If you would just live right next to each other, then it would be too insular. One big piece, and that's something we certainly are not replicating over here because it's 10 in the morning, is you always drink beer. And I love this piece as much as it's very cliche in some respects because it anchors the show. So what are you drinking?
I just finished my coffee. I don't have a fresh cup of coffee right now. I needed some caffeine before going on. Like you said, it's 10 a.m.
I know, it would be a little bit early.
I am a big coffee drinker. I do live in Seattle. I've been up here 7 years. And that's one part of Seattle culture that I've adapted quite well. Locally roasted, good coffee, whether it's black coffee, whether it's a latte, whatever. You learn really quickly why coffee is popular up here, and especially after the time change, you definitely need it.
Yeah, once it gets cold and dreary, when you have this sort of like weird latte color in the sky, like grayness, you need constant fuel. So if you're at home, what kind of coffee do you brew at home, or do you have a coffee shop close by that you always run out for your fix?
Okay, so I'm fortunate to live in the city. I live in West Seattle, which is part of the city. It feels like a suburb at times, but I'm lucky
mainly when the bridge is down. It feels like then it feels like a remote satellite.
Oh, that's an inside joke, I think, because unless you lived in Western Washington or listened to me complain for 2 years on my podcast about the bridge being out and being on an island when it's really a peninsula, we lost our main easy access to the city during the pandemic. It was the week of the first lockdown was announced that our high bridge, our main thoroughfare, was closed, and it took 2+ years. I remember actually when it opened up, I was running Brian Morrison's race out in Tianaway, and I got to after the race, I got to drive directly home as opposed to doing a 5-mile detour.
Nice. So back to coffee.
Oh yeah, so I live in West Seattle. I live in specifically the Alaska Junction, and I can walk to, not counting the Green Mermaid because I do not go there. I could walk to 5 within a half mile. I can walk to 5 local coffee shops.
That is
very and I love it. But I do brew. I brew at home. I use a Chemex. So I grind my own beans. Sourced locally. I buy from Cafe Ladro has some great beans. It's a little further of a walk, but I don't mind walking 1.5 miles to buy beans. So
I love that Cafe Ladro is still there. We used to live in Seattle in the early 2000s, and Cafe Ladro was the cool coffee shop. That had some of the really cool locations. So I'm glad that in this, relentless growth of corporate coffee culture, that some of these local ones are still around. So very, very cool. Okay, so we're drinking coffee. It's early in the morning. We need to, before we dive into lots of topics, we had a pre-show that is completely off the record for many reasons, but quickly paint the picture. You live in Seattle. We already talked about your podcast. We'll link it in the show notes. Beer on the Run is called. How many episodes have you done before we move on?
I mean, numbered episodes, 129. There's been half episodes and unnumbered episodes here and there, but 129 official episodes.
Nice, very cool. And in general, is it just you two? I mean, obviously when I came on, is it you two and a guest, or what's the basic format?
Yeah, so majority of those episodes are us and a guest. We've had a few other formats. We've done a few episodes this year specifically of just me and Clint, just 45 minutes of rambling. Some of that was, a book, whether a guest canceled last minute and we're here this time, let's have a beer, let's catch up. It's been our weekly routine for 3 years. And then also I did a major event this year. And so there was a few episodes where, it was just me and Clint just talking about that. And then we also have, some patrons that we like to do roundtables. We've done that 3, 4, 5 times where we bring our highest level patrons on and do a roundtable, catch them up, have them be part of the show. So we've done that as well. And then there's a few times where we've had multiple guests at once, whether it's a husband and wife team or just a friend was running a 100-miler and we did a crew, the whole crew.
Oh, cool.
We did 1 or 2 episodes like that, including my crew. We did that right before I did my 200-mile attempt. The night before, we were in the RV recording with my entire crew. So yeah, we've done stuff like that. But mostly it's one guest. It's typically either someone in the running world. It doesn't have to be an elite runner. We've done a few elite runners, not many. We've done a lot of backpackers, a lot of mid-packers, a lot of people just getting into running. And then we've done a few of people more so in the beer world than the running world. Those are very rare, but we've people that own a business that is beer related. We had a guy in Sacramento that owns 2 or 3 pizza and beer shops. We have someone coming on real soon who just opened a cidery in Auburn, California, the endurance capital of the world. The alleged. No, it's the endurance capital of the world. I'm just joking. It's just, UTMB kind of messed that up with canyons.
Why? They brought an endurance event to Auburn.
I know, but we have to boycott. Well,
we have to boycott. Okay, we'll talk about that later in the show. Let's keep with your podcast. So many topics. Feverishly writing down all the things we need to check off.
Oh man. How much time do you have?
Let's see here. Okay, my next call is at noon. We're good. Let's roll. Okay. Well, cool. So, podcast. Link in the show notes. Check it out. Be on the run. Let's talk about you, the runner, because You did something for me unfathomable when we just had Wes Plate on the show, who runs 200 miles for breakfast. So it seems you just ran a 200 miler. Congratulations. And I mean, as you mentioned, you clearly talked about this on your podcast at length. Why don't you, before we dive into the 200 mile, give us a quick snapshot of what brought you to a 200 miler?
Yeah. What brought me to 200 miles is my struggles with 100 miles. I can't do 100 miles. Like I have finished exactly 0 out of the 6 trail 100 milers. I've done 100 miles before in a timed event twice. I've done it. I've covered 100 miles in a timed event, whether across the year, so 1 mile loops for 48 hours. And at Born to Run this year, I did the 4-day event, 10-mile loops, and I covered 140 miles. I did a little bit more, but 10-mile loops, that's all you can count. But every trail 100 miler, whether it's, I can name every single one I signed up for and failed. And this goes back 10 years. Zion 100, Bryce 100, Headlands 100, Coldwater Rumble, Javelina, Burning River. That's 6 right there. All DNF'd, including Burning River this year. I got 84 miles in, and my feet were so destroyed from the rain. The first 4 hours, it was pouring rain, and my feet got so destroyed. I at mile 84, 24 hours in, I couldn't move another step.
I mean, people who listen to my show regularly know that I struggle with 100 milers too. I mean, I haven't completed one, and I've only completed 100K and struggled with 100K too. So I feel your pain there. Is it, I mean, the last one you're saying, it's you couldn't move, your feet were so destroyed. That's how it was sort of for me with Zion. That was my first 100 mile attempt. Is it always pain? Is it always injury? Because I get caught by cutoff. That's for me the sort of my big challenge. I'm too slow, right?
Yeah. So when I started doing 100 milers, or attempting them, I should say, I don't think I was in the right mindset, and that was the problem. And yes, there was injuries. A lot of it was also lack of training. I had a really good 2011, 2012, best shape of my life. I mean, I ran marathon PRs. I ran half marathon PRs, stuff that I hadn't done in like 10 years. My half marathon PR, my half marathon PR was originally when I was 21 years old, and I broke it when I was 32. Mm-hmm. And between that time, I was never within like 7-8 minutes. Mm. Like after I ran it at age 21, I was never within 8 minutes of that time. And then I got in really good shape, and that's because of ultra running. I got in really good shape, and that translated into being able to maintain a fast pace for so long. And at age 32, I beat my time for 21. Mm-hmm. And I was, and marathon as well. I tried for so long to break 3 hours in the marathon, and it wasn't until I started ultra running that I was able to break 3 hours in the marathon. And but after really good 2012, I had a lot of stuff in my life that changed, and I wasn't in the right mental spot, and my training fell off, and I was like so desperate. I was like, I need to run 100 miles. I need to run 100 miles. And I never was there physically or mentally. And so even like, I don't know, thinking back now, I don't know if the pains I was experiencing then at certain points in the 100-mile distance would warrant me to stop today. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they were truly injuries or just like normal pains. And also I can endure a lot more now than I could. This is why our sport has always been an older sport, I think, because part of our sport is life experience, and the life experience, and I hate to say this because I do not subscribe to the David Goggins method at all. Like I kind of like cringe when I hear newer runners like, oh, I read this book by, or have you heard of? And like, I cringe. Like running is enjoyable. Running is a passion. Something I've been doing since, before, like in middle school, I was running. Like I've always loved running. Like I enjoyed it because not, I was, better than most people in my school. And so it's like, there's one of the few good things I was good at. But I always enjoyed running. And then I've had periods of time after undergraduate, before getting my grad degree, where I had this lull where I didn't like it, and I didn't have that passion for it. What rejuvenated me was Chris McDougall's book, Born to Run, and that lit something in me. It's like, but it wasn't like running five. I still run 5Ks. I love 5Ks. I think I ran a 5K this year. I ran both a 5K and a 200 miler this year. Probably within months of each other. And I love that. But what got me, like I said, was life experience has really helped me along. Like I actually could have, like, if it wasn't for the deluge for 4 hours in Ohio this summer, I would have finished Burning River. But I also didn't go into that as a race. That was like, I need a 100-mile training run.
Yeah. And if you then do 80-ish, then you feel like you got your training in, right?
84 miles. Like, like to be able to do that. And, what was that, 6 weeks before? No, it was, I don't know what the time was. It was like 2 months before or whatever it was. And I was like, oh yeah, this is perfect. Okay. Like it wasn't a failure. I don't think it was a failure at all. It just mentally is like 0 for 6.
Yeah. No. That feeling, I 100% hear you. And I also feel like early on in the races, now looking back, I also wonder if I could have endured more if I would have been in a better headspace. I'm just a slow runner, and so I never find myself in a place where I have enough time to reset. You always see these top runners. I mean, the elites usually, they, when they're not doing well, they immediately throw in the towel and hop onto the next race, mostly, right? Most.
Mostly. We do have some heroes in our sport.
Exactly. But in general, I'm trying to say this, I said this a little flippant, but I also understand that, right? If you have enough races on your calendar, right, you sort of have to manage your fitness and well-being. And so there is a part where I actually understand the kind of the longer arch of it all, right? But I see people who have like, oh yeah, I just needed to sleep for a half hour at an aid station. I'm always like, yeah, I never have that luxury. So, but I mean, perhaps you're speaking about passion, and perhaps passion is the answer, but what gets you from being able to run a fast half marathon, not complete 100-mile, but then decide that a 200-miler is the answer to it all?
So they're always in my mind. Right? They've been in my mind. It's like, because I loved watch. What I like is what the human body can do, like, and knowing my human body, like my family is not athletic at all. Like part of the reason I got into running was in spite of my family. Like it's like, we're humans. We should be able to do this stuff, right? But so like I like to do just things that like, oh, we can do that. Like, so Lake Washington is 50 miles around. It's borders Seattle on one side and Bellevue on the other side, and I've gone around it twice on foot. And to me, that's the stuff I like to do. I like to do, like, whether it's a point to point or something that, like, what can the human body do? And so, these 200-mile races are, like, kind of intrigued me, and I never thought I'd actually do one. And leading up to this year, Luis Escobar puts on Born to Run, the weekend extravaganza down in Los Olivos, California every year. And I've gone, this was my 10th, it's been happening 12 times, and this was my 10th time going. I was like, I need to do something special for this being my 10th time. Because this event, like, has really changed my life in terms of, like, friend group, having me come out of my shell. I'm a total introvert. And to be able, it's one thing to do this on screen over Zoom talk to people is one thing, but to be able to, I'm awkward as hell when I'm talking to people in real life. Like I have people come up to me, whether, I'm pouring beer, on the side or just in life, and just come talk to me. I'm like, like it takes a lot for me able to have a conversation. I have to like really know someone, really trust someone to have an in-person conversation. But like Born to Run kind of changed that. Like I feel like a totally different person when I'm there. It's just a really cool environment that Lewis has created. And so for my 10th year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a belt buckle. And I was thinking like, okay, I have 4 days. That's 25 miles a day. That's all I have to do to get a 100-mile belt buckle. And I go out there and I was like, I discovered I could walk really fast. I knew I could walk fast, but I didn't know how long I could walk for. And so most of that was like walking like really fast, but also I had some running out there. And I got, I got to 100 miles on day 2 with some friends. Had a lot of fun crossing the last 20 miles. Miles 80 to 100 were so much fun. And I had so much energy. And so I was like, okay, how much more can I get? And I kept going throughout the weekend. And I took a lot of breaks. This was like, I'd go 20 to 40 miles at a time. I would party. I would, there's live music. There's lots of activities going on. We recorded a podcast on day 2. So I was like at mile 60 when I recorded a podcast, drinking a beer too. Like that's obviously what we do during our podcast, and at the event. And I got, and I felt really good until about mile 115. My shin at that time started to really act up because it was not an even surface. We were on a cattle farm, and it was rain. This year has been a rainy year for Southern California, and there's lots of ruts, lots of dried out ruts. So it's not a smooth surface. And my shin really started acting up. And I went from like feeling super good for 115 miles to like by mile 135, I was like, I could barely move. The great people at Ghost Leaves helped me at least get through the weekend. They gave me some of their ointment. I didn't have my card on me, or they didn't have cell reception, I should say. So they gave me a pair of sleeves I would buy later, and I took another night off and was like, okay, the final morning went out to finish the last loop to get it to 140. But doing that, I was like, if I slow down, something I'm not good at, like, what can I do? And so I spent this whole summer walking, like not running. I spent the summer walking, and I was like, it slows my brain down. It doesn't mess my stomach up. I could eat and walk. I can have a full meal and then go for a walk and not feel like my stomach's going to explode, right? So I was like, okay, I can go probably a lot further if I walk. So like Burning River, I actually walked every step. Like 84 miles, I didn't run at all. And I was like, oh, okay, I could walk 84 miles in these conditions, and I had already signed up for Nebraska for Cowboy 200, but like, Born to Run is what got me motivated. Like, okay, 140 miles in 4 days. I took a lot of breaks, This was like, I could do 200 miles in under 4 days. And I'd already been eyeing Cowboy. It came up in our podcast when we were talking to a guest, kind of like, it came up as a joke, I think, in our podcast, because we were talking about the Midwest and like, there's nothing good in the Midwest, Look, I love the Midwest. I have family in Cleveland. I love, like, people will argue Pittsburgh's not Midwest, Pittsburgh's Midwest. But I love the Midwest. And so it was like, when I was joking around on the podcast and I saw this race, I was like, this looks fascinating. And I've never been to Nebraska before. Like, so after Born to Run, got the 140 miles in, I was working a side shift at a bar, and I had a really good tip night, I think I made like $500 in tips in one night. It was like, it was a private party.
Yeah.
And that does not ever happen, but it was a private party. It was within
like, where do you work? Sign me up for a couple shifts.
No. Believe me, there's many nights where I get $20 in tips. But it was within a month of Born to Run, just done 140 miles, had this large chunk of money in my pocket. And I pulled up Cowboy and was like, it's $500 to sign up.
Nice.
And it happened that night. I was like, doing it. And okay, now you have all summer to train. And so like throughout the summer, like I said, slowed things down, walked a lot. Like I was walking 10 plus miles at a time. I think I had 1 week where I walked every day 10 miles for, I think it was more than a week. I think it was 8 or 9 days in a row. I walked 10 miles every day for 9 days. Walked the entire 84 miles until I couldn't anymore at Burning River. I walked the entire Snoqualmie Valley Trail, which is 32 miles. As a training exercise, I went from Duval to Rattlesnake Ridge on foot, and those are the things that interest me, like point to point. Like I want to. There's a lot of these long rail to trails I want to do here in Washington State. Like just logistically, it's like how do I do it without inconveniencing loved ones? So when I got to a Cowboy, I don't think I was never. There was only one time I was in doubt of not being able to finish, and I was pretty confident going into the race, and I was pretty confident throughout the race, except for one point. And I got through that low point, and once I got through that low point, I knew I had it, and it was incredible because like I said, over 600 miles, like so. So yeah, for me, it was slowing down, not speeding up, is what got me to.
Usually, they say you're supposed to slow down during training, right? So you can race fast, but you do the opposite, and it works for you. That's amazing. I hope my coach is going to be really mad that I have you on, because he's trying to get me to run, because I used to be a big walker. I believed in walking, especially during COVID. I did sort of the same thing, really long walks, right? 12-mile walks, super fast too, right? I mean, under 14-minute miles walking, right? Did you use poles during the races?
At Cowboy, yes. At nighttime only. I only I was like, whatever can help me through the night. So like at nighttime, had them with me. Fortunately, there was times, especially when I was falling asleep, having those were really important. I wish I had them at Burning River, because I think I might have been able to finish. Because my feet were messed up, but my legs were dead. And so like taking even like a little bit of pressure off my legs, especially in the night, would have helped me go a little bit further, I think. Maybe I would have got to 90 miles, but maybe I got to 100. Who knows? So that's one thing I do regret not having at Burning River. But at Cowboy, every night I had the poles. So the 3 nights I was out there, I had poles with me. During the day, I did not use poles.
Yes, and it's an amazing story, because man, I don't know. I really don't want to do 200-mile races, but hearing that you had success with this distance, especially after struggling on the 100-mile distance, I'm now reconsidering. As I said, I'm not going to share this podcast episode with my coach, because he's going to be so mad, because he's like, no, you need to run 100 miles and you can do this and you can get faster. Like, he's sort of teaching everything that is the opposite of what you discovered. So which is amazing. So yeah, congratulations. I mean, it's so great to hear that somebody who, I mean, people who run ultra distances in general do it for the passion, right? Yes, they're the people who desperately need the wins for themselves, right? They're like perhaps overly tense or so. But in general, you're out there for so long, you have to do it for the passion. And it does suck, even if you can tell yourself and other people around you, especially ones that don't run, who say, what, you ran 84 miles? That's amazing, right? I mean, people in general are positive about you. But we still have a goal. I mean, you don't achieve it, there is something nagging about it, right? There is something where you're like, you can make peace with it and you can see, it's all about the progress and yada, yada, right? But there is something where making it to the finish line is nice, is important, is valuable for the soul, right? So congratulations. I'm glad you found that. So are you already signed up for another 200-miler? Is that now your thing?
So no, I'm not signed up for a 200-miler, and I had an awesome crew of family and chosen family out there. We rented an RV, so I wanted to make sure that my crew had an adventure and had fun. And actually, the funny thing is, I planned. It's like, you guys go do this, go do that, and like they were trying to catch up on sleep on themselves. They didn't do any adventuring, and also we were not the most populous part of Nebraska's not populous anyways, but
Mhm.
we weren't in any major city.
Right.
And so
It's not like they could like go out and do stuff.
there was like one or two cool things that I suggested that there was like a fossil park within an hour drive of where we were. That was probably the coolest thing that they missed out on. But yeah, for the most part, no, there was nothing really cool other than one of my crew, one of our dear friends here in West Seattle, Liz. She knew the owner. She's good friends with the owners of the brewery where the race finishes. So she had so much fun at the finish line because she was just hanging out with her friends that she hasn't seen in a while.
Yeah,
so
cool.
and it was. I think I've shared the story 1,000 times on my podcast, but the joke was when I signed up for the race, the first person, other than obviously my spouse Kara, obviously that's the first conversation I have. But the second person we invite on the trip, and originally it was just going to be a 2-person. It was just going to be Kara and Liz. I was like, hey Liz, what are you doing in September? Do you want to come to Nebraska? And she's like, oh, cool. What for? And I was like, I'm running a 200-mile race. She's like, yeah, awesome. I have friends that own a brewery in Nebraska. I was like, cool. This race finishes at a brewery in Nebraska. I was like, where's your friend's brewery? And she's like, in Valentine. I was like, well, there's only one brewery in Valentine. I was like, this race finishes at Bolo Brewing in Valentine. She's like, that's my friend's brewery.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
So Liz obviously was signed up immediately for that. Yeah, so the original plan was just 2-people crew. I went full out. We had a 4-person crew. Three of them were pacers. And I rented an RV for them, a small RV for them, which was fun. If I go back, I kind of want to do this on my own. Like I'm thinking about going back to this race specifically for 2 reasons. One, the race director was amazing, and 2. There was a few detours on the course this year because of bridge washouts, and supposedly all the bridges are going to be back in full service next year. And I think 1 or 2 of them were actually amazing bridges. Like most of the this is billed as like 200 plus bridges, and there were, although you can lose count of them really quickly. I tried to count every bridge, and by mile 17, I was already lost. Most of them are like 10-foot bridges, like small little bridges. But then there's like 2 or 3 like huge bridges over ravines, like 200-foot drop over a river, over whatever, a valley, and they're incredible. Like what the main bridge is with 2 miles left in the race, and it's a 1/4-mile long bridge over a 200-foot ravine with a river below you, and that's how you finish the race. I was like, okay, cool. But this breaks up. There were some really mindless parts of that race where it was like miles on a highway next to a highway with just one cornfield next to you and nothing else, and like in the middle of the day, no shade. Like, how am I going to get through this? But I would go back to that race and do it solo. Like, I'm plotting that because I would probably drive the 20 hours from Seattle to Valentine, Nebraska, park my car at the brewery, take the shuttle that they provide to the start line, and do it solo and do it that way. I would also probably incorporate some running. Like, I did not run a single step for 200 miles. I would probably incorporate some running, maybe get done a little bit faster, not too much faster, obviously. Because knowing my brain, I'm like, oh, let's go. I can do this in 60 hours. I'm like, and then next thing you know, I'm DNFing. No, like maybe at nighttime, like when I'm starting to like maybe add some jogging to that to break it up and maybe speed up my heart rate to keep me awake a little bit more, stuff like that. So I would probably go back to that. Again, it's saying that you're going from one city to another city halfway across the state. That, like, what can the human body do? That's incredible. Like, I probably also look at a certain 250-mile race down in Arizona. That one also kind of intrigues me. But that's more expensive. That's way more expensive. That's outside my budget currently.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. Well, I mean, it's awesome that you experience the 200 miles, and perhaps that the 200-mile distance in general lends itself so extremely well for putting it into areas that aren't the classic most pictures areas, because 200-mile distances, you will not cover only beautiful areas, right? I mean, even UTMB around Mont Blanc doesn't have only beautiful trails, right? There are areas where you run through towns and along streets and stuff. And so the idea that you can cover that many miles and only on beautiful pictures terrain is unreasonable. And so it's kind of cool that areas that aren't Mountain West, right? These classic destination areas are discovering these distances and bringing people out. I mean, I love the stories that you're telling of this race. I mean,
oh, and don't get me wrong, Nebraska is a beautiful state. It was. I thought it was a gorgeous state, and like, yeah, there was bits and pieces where, it's kind of like there was a 5 mile stretch going into a town called Long Pine, where there was other stretches along highways, but there was trees, there was other things to break up the view, also give you more shade when you have to use the bathroom, as opposed to just peeing on the side of a highway with no shade or protection. But it was a 5 mile stretch, no shade, no trees, and there was just one cornfield to your right and a highway to your left, and like you couldn't even break up quarter miles. Like you couldn't even okay, I'm gonna look a quarter mile down here and slowly walk towards it. You couldn't even do that for 5 miles. And that was the toughest part. That's not when I thought I was going to DNF though, but that was the toughest mental part. But the rest, it was gorgeous. And then the night sky. We get a great night sky up here in Western Washington. Even going out to like the Cascades, like for Cascade Crest, you get amazing night sky. No, nothing like being in the middle of Nebraska. We saw a Starlink launch. Like we literally saw the Starlink launch, and it was incredible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that was not a hallucination.
No, I mean, this is this thing. I'm not trying to, poo flyover country. For me, as a German, I anyway don't get to do this because I don't have any history in this country, right? But it's about storyline. It's about storytelling, right? It's so easy to tell the Mountain West and the outdoors sort of go hand in hand. Every outdoor catalog has these typical pictures of what we expect from sort of our outdoor experiences. And we can have so many more. And a 200-mile race is such a perfect way of discovering a landscape and sort of telling a different story of a place and making it equally beautiful. I love this. Well, cool. So this is your running story and landscape, and now we in a nutshell, and now we like almost covered the entire show, but we have so much more to talk about because on top of it, and we're getting sort of into the interesting conversations now. You're also a race director, and tell me a little bit about how you got started, because you don't own your own running company, so you are sort of a race director in a different sphere, in a different format, which is exciting.
Yes. Yeah, so it's kind of cool how I came into this role with our running club, and it is way different than most race directors. And I'm actually, I think we talked about this offline. I'm trying to get my streamline my life. And so I will be passing the reins on. I did this for 2 years. I would love to have done it for longer, but part of streamlining my life. It doesn't give me the opportunity to put as much effort into it as I would like. But so my running club, Seattle Running Club, is a nonprofit. We were founded originally as a for-profit by Scott McCoubrey, who owned Seattle Running Company, which is a shoe store. There was a shoe store up here in Seattle that had many great employees that have done amazing things in our sport, whether starting their own shoe companies or running specialty stores throughout the region in Oregon and in Washington, as well as being amazing elite athletes. Names like Scott Jurek, names like Hal Corner, people that have worked at the store, right? He also created White River 50. That was his race as well. So he had a running store. He started a running club, originally for profit, turned into a nonprofit, and then he also had a White River 50 miler. So when the club became nonprofit, had a board of directors, and so we operate as a true nonprofit. And 21 years ago, they put on a race at Cougar Mountain, which is a county regional park, wilderness park here in just outside Seattle. So it's actually in Bellevue. and King County Parks is the government agency there, and part of the deal was we could be, as long as we donate a portion of our proceeds back to them, we're the only organization allowed to put on races in this wilderness park.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like it's the funny thing is, like, you think of Pacific Northwest, this is more of like it's a big park. It's not like, even Tiger Mountain is more mountainous. Like there are hills. Like our 50K has 7,000 feet of climbing, but it's like so many trails, and it's super popular. It's great wintertime running when too much snow up in the further east and for the higher elevations. But I think during the summer, most people head towards the Cascades or the higher stuff. But we put our races on during the summertime and fall, and we have distances from 5K to 50K. We try to have it for everyone. Multiple distances per race in the summer series. And so this has been going on for 21 years now. We've had races at Cougar Mountain, and I believe I'm race director number 3 or 4 since then. Like, Dustin was there for like 10 years, and before that there was someone else there for 10. So when Dustin, our previous race director, had to move out of state, it was kind of a last minute thing for work. We were looking for a race director, kind of like we are now. And our club president reached out to me because they thought I'd be a good fit for it. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Because I've always wanted to put on races. I still have other ideas for races I want to put on. I can't even talk about those. But I was like, okay, cool. And so I took over last year. My first in-person race I was not at because I had COVID.
Oh my gosh.
I got COVID 3 days before my first race. Oh and so I had to manage the race from my sofa while falling asleep because COVID, at least when I got it, I was tired. I slept a lot, and I was like falling asleep while texting, so like the first race, fortunately, it was the May race, which is only a 5 mile and a 10-mile race. So short distances, short time. It's only, we're only out there for 4 or 5 hours. Only one aid station plus finish line food. So there wasn't like too much moving parts for this first race that I was not at. Yeah. But it's cool. So like when I first took over, it was like, I took what Dustin was doing and I kept doing it. And then over the past 2 years, I've got to put my own touches on things. So we used to give out as finishing prizes a variety of things, but whether like actually I was drinking my coffee out of one of them, but all this stuff, like, so glassware, coffee cups, all these things, they're made in China, they're shipped over here. The quality, like based on, because we're a nonprofit, we don't charge much for our races. Like our 50K is $100, like how many 50Ks can you run locally that are $100? And so it's like, okay, what else can I do? And unfortunately, a friend of mine, actually 2 friends of mine, and they both were in Nebraska with me. He bought a wood laser because they have 2 kids and they're like early 20s, and he kind of wanted to create a business for them, and so like he's like, okay, let me buy some wood lasers and maybe we can make running medals for local races. And so I was his first customer, and so we switched from buying, we have in our storage, we have boxes of ungiven out, because part of race planning is you rather have too many medals than not enough, right? Because you don't want to be like, oh, I'll mail you your finishing medal. Like that's the worst feeling in the world. So like we have in our storage like probably about 10 boxes of beer glasses, coffee cups, all this stuff that's branded Cougar Mountain. Fortunately, we don't put dates on things, but they're sitting in storage. And so one of the things we switched over to was wood finishing medals, and same thing. Like they've evolved over time, and I think they're really cool where they are now, what he's doing. And then there's other things. When I was before I was race director, when I was talking with Dustin, I was like, and this was like 3, 4, 5 years ago, I was like, hey, what do we do about non-binary registration? And he eventually turned that on because that became an option on Ultra Sign Up. But in one of my races last year, we were still using Ultra Sign Up for our registration, and we had 2 non-binary runners that registered. And then when we tried to post the results to Ultra Sign Up, we got an error because they could, at the time, this was their phase 1 in inclusion. You could register, but you couldn't have results. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that to me that didn't make sense, Yeah. And so I was like trying to find other platforms, and we were also using Run Sign Up for results. We weren't using it for registration; we were just using it for results. And I reached out to them and I learned about what their system is. I'm like, why don't we? I mean, it's also slightly cheaper on registration fees. Why don't we move over there? And so that was part of making the race my own, was taking what started. We had non-binary registration. Now we have non-binary awards. We have top 3 non-binary awards in each distance, and we have one race every year, which is a prize money race. It's our August race. It's a 14.5 mile race, and USATF, the local chapter, the PNTF chapter, match. If we do prize money, they match for the men and women Masters and Open. And I know, and I'm not going to get into USATF and IAAF and all these other organizations, but they are not very inclusive when it comes to trans inclusion and non-binary inclusion. And but as a local race director, I can be, mm-hmm. And I want to be, mm-hmm. And it's not just because I have non-binary friends. It's not because my view of the world. It's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And so for the August race this past year, and unfortunately I had 0 runners. I didn't have anyone go after it. Mm-hmm. And that's probably on me for not marketing it better. But I went to my board and I asked, can we, without, obviously USATF's not going to reimburse us, but can we have equal prize money for mm-hmm. non-binary? And they're like, and I'm lucky to be on a amazing board for CI Running Club, and they're immediately, that was like no questions asked, yes. Mm-hmm. And so we did that. And so that's kind of the cool thing about, like I said, it's a little bit different than starting, I have this course in mind, I want to start a race. I came in as, we already have this course, we already have these permits, we already, this is the processes we were doing. If you want to improve them. And I think I've done a good job. We've grown we definitely had a huge dip in registration when COVID started. And that was before, and I took over in the middle of COVID, and we've been getting our numbers back. And, mm-hmm. Whether it's because people are more comfortable or whether it's stuff I'm doing, I don't know. But I feel like I've been doing a good enough job of creating a fun environment for our races, and the numbers are coming back. And, it's been a great, I put on 11 races. I have one more race I'm putting on in January up in Kirkland called Bridle Trails. That's probably going to be my last one as the RD, but I think I've done a good job in terms of creating a fun environment that's open to people. Again, we talked about this earlier. I'm an introvert, so the whole marketing aspect is not my strong suit, mm-hmm. But even without the marketing aspect, and we do have marketing. We Northwest Trail Run's our partner that co-produces it. Eric Bone does an amazing job with his organization, and they do a lot of marketing. Aaron Roche, who's our social media board member with CI Running, he does a great job on Instagram and Facebook. So there is marketing.
Yeah.
But there's more I could do. Like I said, there's no reason I have 0 entrance in a money race for the non-binary division because I didn't do a good job marketing that. Mm-hmm. Because there are, just here in the Pacific Northwest, including Oregon, including Portland and Western Washington, I could probably get more than 5 non-binary runners to compete for prize money, and we would go 5 deep in prize. We should have given out all 5.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting aspect which is completely out of left field, but I mean, there are lots of races that have put up lots of prize money in the hope to attract elites. And because we've been sort of hearing that prize money is something that elites need in order to really be professional runners, and it's a right and good thing. And then the prize money shows up at races, and then the runners don't show up. And so there's an interesting aspect in that conversation too. But wow, I mean, I have millions of questions.
Oh yeah, wait, hold on one second. Can I say one cool thing though?
Yeah.
And this is completely out of the blue. This was for a non-prize money race. This was for a 5-mile race. This was in May of this year. Eric Bone from Northwest Trail Runs emails me. He's like, "Hey, Joseph Gray wants to run the race. Can we give him a comp?" I was like, "Hell yes, we can." And I think he came within, because he also has the course record. So he's from up here. He's from Tacoma originally, even though he lives out in Colorado now. So he's a local here. He is a local celebrity. And he came out. He ran Tiger Claw's Ascent the day before, won that, which I ran. And then he comes out the next day and comes within 9 seconds of his own course record for the 5-miler.
That is amazing.
So it's cool to, like, I can say I had an elite run my race.
Nice. Fantastic. Well, let's talk about Tiger Claw. How do you feel that Tiger Claw puts their race on at the same weekend as yours?
I don't think it competes at all. And I think, and this is as our sport grows, and also our sport is very late spring, summer heavy because of weather, because of weather conditions. Yes, I'm bummed that I don't get to be out, like, at least the past 2 years. I did go out and volunteer. I ran Tiger Ascent on Friday night, worked my race Saturday morning, and then volunteered at an aid station in the evening on Saturday afternoon. I was like, because all my friends were out there, you know. But it doesn't compete. Like, it's a 50K race, a 50K mountain race versus a 5 and 10 mile, trail race on the same day. Yes, they're one mountain apart. They're both local, but there's only so many weekends you can put on a race, right? And if Ethan put on that race any other weekend, there'd be other complaints. There'd be like, "Oh, you're competing against this race. You're competing against this race."
So why are we complaining then that UTMB puts on a race mid-September in Whistler?
See, that's a different complaint. That is a.
I want to hear you say this, because my question is so ridiculous.
Yeah. So the issue of the UTMB, so they were purchased by a.
Well, weren't purchased. They weren't purchased.
Well, no, they're owned by a venture capital.
It's part ownership.
Okay.
Poletti still own a majority stake in it.
Okay. But there's money backing it, right?
Sure.
Big money backing it. And I don't think they necessarily play by the rules. Part of ultra running is community and community building. That's what part of ultra running is. And when you go in what appears to be, I obviously was not in the room for either their private conversations with Vail or their conversations with Gary, and we've seen Gary's posts. We've seen UTMB's also posted about this as well. What it looks like to the outside world, to the general public, especially to someone like myself that is very opinionated and very well read in what's going on in the world. What it looks like to us is they couldn't get Gary to sell, or didn't want to even approach Gary because Gary wouldn't sell his other race. So didn't even approach Gary. They went to Vail separately and like, look at our races. Look how many people we bring in. This would be X amount of economic growth for your city, for your resort here, right? Give us this opportunity to put our races on here instead of Gary. That's what it looks like, right? Because why else would Vail make this decision if it wasn't, oh yeah, we would bring this is bringing twice as amount of economic growth or development, than this other race that's been going on for X amount of years. That's the only thing that, without being a fly on the wall for any of these meetings, that's the only thing that it looks like to us, the general public. We talk about, and you said you listened to my rant episode of Beer on the Run, and I compare it a lot to macro beer, to the Budweiser, the Anheuser-Busch, AB InBev, the Coors, the Molson Coors of the world. These large corporations that have so much money and use their money to get into markets without building the community in that market. But there was one example I forgot to bring up in that conversation that I wanted to, and this is a sports related conversation. In San Diego, so there's two levels of, well, there's more than two levels, but there's two major levels of soccer in America, men's soccer, I should say. There's MLS, Major League Soccer, and then there's USL, which is a development league, or essentially a development league for Major League Soccer. San Diego has had a great team called the Loyal the past few years, locally owned, playing in Snapdragon Stadium on the San Diego State University campus. Huge fan base, selling out their games. Very loyal, great. Their name's Loyal, but yes, a very loyal fan base. San Diego fans, sports fans are amazing. Major League Soccer did not approach the ownership of USL's team. They found an outside San Diego investor and announced that they're going to bring a Major League Soccer team to that stadium, meaning that the Loyal would lose their lease without doing any of the talks. Without it, basically forced out the Loyal, and the Loyal made an announcement earlier this year that they're shutting down. A team with a huge fan base is closing because they couldn't compete because they were pushed out by a larger organization. And I think that's probably the best. That example is probably the closest to what we're seeing with UTMB and Whistler.
So, a couple questions I have is then, because currently what Vail and what UTMB Ironman is saying is that they didn't start talking until after February, after Gary had definitively said, we are done with Whistler. Are you insinuating, suggesting that this is bullshit?
I'm saying, without being a fly on the wall, without being there, and I can't definitively say anything because I don't want to be sued, No.
I mean, I don't know what be sued.
I know. Opinion. I'm a nobody that with a very small podcast. Yeah. That's why I can say the things I say.
Yeah.
But what appears to the general public, and especially the knowledgeable general public, what it appears to be is that there is more to the story than obviously UTMB is letting on, and that there obviously was some promises made to Vail, or some appearances made to Vail of what it might look like if you change race partners, and what the economic impact would be to the resort. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, I can very much see that if UTMB rolls up, that Vail bends over and says yes, right? I mean, that is a no-brainer. For me, it all hinges on the timeline, right? UTMB says they did not engage about Whistler until Gary had definitively said we're done with Whistler. And the Gary supporting voices online saying that based on how it smells, we don't believe that. And that's that's the prerogative. I think we can believe that, but currently we don't have any proof of that, and so it's hard to go down that road, right? Because I mean, we can't solve that, right? We weren't in the room, we don't know, and so we need to leave it at that. I think there's a secondary point now, and that is your San Diego example, and that is, at this point, UTMB owns 40 races, and on the UTMB index for the year of 2023, so the races that have agreed to upload their results to the UTMB site, so runners can get their index for UTMB, was over 5,000 globally, right? That was just the UTMB index races. That doesn't even include any races that weren't on the index, right? So do we see, which is also something that has not yet happened, but do we see that UTMB races are going to get so big that it's going to force other races to not be able to operate? Is that a genuine fear? I mean, it's a theoretical possibility, but is it a genuine fear?
So, and I think a lot of my views are also very North American centric, because I don't think a majority of the people in Europe or in Asia or runners even throughout the world, I don't think they care about this specific thing. This seems
The Whistler
very
issue.
the Whistler issue. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why there is a lot of uproar is because um, Gary has built a following and is linked with other people that have built a following, and so people are going to support Gary, and those are the vocal voices we're hearing. But they're also very North American centric. Yeah, There was one runner in England, that spoke up, but I think majority of people that are doing this is kind of like Iron Man, right? There's a certain type of person that does Iron Man, right? And I think there's going to be a certain type of person that will continue to do UTMB, and that numbers will grow. And also, as time goes on, people will also forget about this specific thing. And like I said, I vote with my wallet, right? I support those who I want to support, and that's how I've always been. I operate that way in many aspects of my life, including beer. I buy there's even craft brewers I won't buy from because I don't agree with them. Both locally here and also nationally, there are craft breweries that have lost my, and I'm one person, but they've lost my dollar, right? And that's all I can do. That's all I can do. And so, yes, there UTMB upset a lot of people, but there's a lot more people that didn't upset or didn't pay attention to, that don't know what's going on and don't care to know, and they're going to continue because UTMB is the cool thing, and everyone wants to get to Chamonix every year, and they're going to keep doing these races throughout the world to get them to Chamonix. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever flirt with this idea of running there?
No, I'm not sure whether it's just like the financial aspect of getting there or the amount of planning that it would take that just would exhaust me to plan that far in advance. The idea of like, oh, I have to book a year in advance a hotel or Airbnb or something out there, and I don't even know if I'm in the race yet, and then blah blah blah, and that already is so exhausting that I had no interest. Yeah. Would it be cool to go out there and hike around the mountain? Sure, make a week of it. Slow down, have fun.
Yeah. No, it is an interesting beast. I'm not trying to defend UTMB and saying, hey, I'm the big shill here. I think, bigger, better, faster, more, everything is great. I'm trying to read a lot. I'm trying to listen a lot. I'm trying to hear what people are saying. I'm curious. You mentioned very early on as we start talking about this, UTMB did not play by the rules of our community. And I'm trying to define them, right? What are the rules? Because I think, you speak to it on a global scale, and I think there are definitely different rules in different places, right? But I think, especially here in North America, I think we do have a very strong feeling about what a race should be, how much it should cost, what the atmosphere should be, and what location it should be, right? And I think these are really great things. And I agree, so far, UTMB has not delivered to the glitz. I feel like the races that have bought, Kodiak was, I think, in a super cool location, and I would in a heartbeat go back and run this again if I could figure out a deal with altitude, because it was a cool place. But
did you run Kodiak before?
I DNF'd 100K.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I've been. I was there the first year, pacing and crewing a friend. This is a long time ago. This is like multiple race directors ago. So there was originally like 3 founders of that race, and so I was there the first year with a friend of ours from Southern California, crewing and pacing, and that back when the race used to start at nighttime, start at 6 p.m. So everyone, whether you're elite or not, has to go through the first night.
Nice. I felt like it was a super cool location. It was a much better, just geographic location than I felt like running in Auburn. I ran the Canyon 50K. And while I appreciated the running on hollowed ground, and I respect the history of it, right? And the American River area was beautiful and stuff, right? But I felt like Auburn itself, and I'm probably gonna get crucified for it, but it's not a very special city, right? I mean, it's not like a Big Bear is like this picturesque little resort town. Like I would take my family to go to the Big Bear, right, and hang out at the restaurants there, right? Wherein for me, Auburn is one of those like classic cities that you go there for a specific reason, but other than that, you don't really need to be there.
The other
That
thing is
sounds
like,
a little harsh, but
I mean, also Big Bear is like, a suburb of Los Angeles, essentially. Like
almost, yeah.
LA is sprawled so much eastward, that you get into the San Bernardino Valley right there. You just get off the mountain, you're in the San Bernardino Valley, and you're going to have not maybe the caliber of restaurants that you're in Los Angeles, but the price points will be a little lower. But you're still going to have like an you're right there. Whereas Auburn is like technically a suburb of Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
But Sacramento's also a small, like, sorry, Clint.
Yeah.
Sacramento's a smaller city. No, Sacramento's a great city for food and beer. I'll tell you that right now. But like, it doesn't like that quality as you're going further to the suburb doesn't necessarily translate. Whereas, Big Bear, you're right there in Los Angeles, Los Angeles adjacent, essentially, right, just off the mountain.
Yeah. I mean, the drive from LA out into the mountains was awesome. But and again, right, I think this is not about hurting anybody's feelings or dissing someone. No, I mean, it's like Chamonix. Chamonix is an iconic city, and there are like dozens of resort type cities that sort of grew around the Alps because they very early on had the Winter Olympics, right? I mean, Chamonix, Innsbruck, Garmisch-Partenkirchen, Cortina, all of these cities that we now know they were some of the early ones that had the Winter Olympics, and so they've grown because of it, and grew sort of the attention, and grew sort of that focus around sports and mountain activity and stuff, right? And there are tons of places that are equally as awesome, or are not as awesome as Chamonix, because Chamonix does have a unique place with the glacier coming sort of right to the edge of the city. So visually, right? I mean, there is something very special about this place. So anyway, going back to the rules of the community, do you think UTMB, like, could UTMB be a good player? Because essentially you come as a race director from a nonprofit point of view, right? Where you can't really, you've already put a lot of your personal stamps on it, but you're not like Go Beyond or Daybreak Racing, right? There's a for-profit organizations that, I mean, by and large, being a for-profit business in America is not something to look down upon, right? There's a big difference between a for-profit entity doing what it wants, deciding what races to run and what swag to buy, versus what UTMB does, right? Sort of coming from the outside in. So can they be a good player, or is it just because they're Walmart, they have no chance?
No, and that's the thing. They can, if they make the like. I've never been to a UTMB race. Like, you mentioned Kodiak. I had a friend of mine that went down to crew this past year at Kodiak or Pace, and saw, and someone that knew the previous race directors, and saw there were some changes, both good and bad. But there's also obviously more money, like, where this was a small race, and some of these races might not be able to, one of the reasons why you do sell is because the option might be for it to go away completely. Like, something that you worked on, you built, it either goes away, or you sometimes have to sell. And there's obviously the third option is, what Gary's doing is keep growing. What Go Beyond's doing, keep growing. Go Beyond, huge shout out to them down in Oregon. Up here, Northwest Trail Runs, our partner in co-producing our races, they're doing a great job. They're growing. There's lots of these, but to be part of, to create a community, I think. Were you there for Tim Tollefson's keynote speech at the very open?
No, I missed that one. Yeah.
Okay. And so he's building a race, a festival from scratch, essentially, in his hometown. And he's 2 or 3 years in now. And one cool thing that he's doing is the purpose is to come for the weekend, and there's events and throughout. Like, it's not just show up, run, leave, right? Um, and he's putting his touch on things, whether so like his ascent race has coffee and donuts at the finish line at the top, you know, which is awesome, right? And but then throughout the weekend there's panels and there's movies being screened and keeping people together and doing things together throughout the weekend. And it's not just you show up, you run, you leave. And I kind of joke that this is kind of like the old school Scott Jurek thing where the first person to finish is the last person to the finish line, right? Like back when runners used to stick around for all the finishers. And I would love for us to get back to that. I don't care the distance. I think for all ultra races, I would love for us to get back to, doesn't matter when you finish, you're sticking around to that last person cross to that finish line, and that last person is going to have just as loud, if not louder, applause for them than the first person finishing. And that's why I love what we do. That's what attracted us to what we do. Is that's the community I want. That's supporting each other. And I'm saying about Tim's races, the Mammoth Trail Fest. What it appears to me, I haven't been there and I want to go. Is he is building a community. He's working both with the local people, the local commerce, you know what I'm talking about. My brain is mush.
Tourism bureau or whatever.
Yeah, it's almost time for a second cup of coffee. But
I know, right? We've been going for a while.
But he's working locally, and then yes, he's bringing people in from outside, but he's keeping them there and engaged. That's what he's doing. Ethan up here with Tiger Claw, he has two days of racing now, and there's unofficial events. He's not keeping everyone in Issaquah, but there's lots of unofficial events from the community that he's built over time, and he's built a huge community over time. Stuff like that, where it's not just you drive to the race, you run it, you leave. Like I'll give it a little shout out to Western States on this one, because the way Western States does their awards, especially for the elite, their buckle ceremony and their elites, you don't get a buckle when you finish. You get a buckle an hour after the final cutoff, right? And so that keeps people at the track. Now, yes, some people, you just finished 100 miles. You're going to go sleep, you're going to shower or whatever you're going to do. But it keeps people at the track. And golden hour at Western States is a thing to watch. Like, and I've both been there in person for it, and I've watched it every year on YouTube, and it's a thing to watch. And the number of runners that finish in that last hour is incredible, and a lot of the stories that come out of it, is incredible. And then you have everyone getting their buckles as well and so I will give a huge shout out to Western States for that aspect, because they are keeping people at the finish line, especially for the later finishers. You have everyone there.
This is literally exactly what UTMB is doing in Chamonix, right? I mean, their finish awards ceremony is, I think you have 48 hours, 44 hours, 48 hours to run UTMB, and their awards ceremony is exactly during the last hour, and they are awarding and bringing the last runner that comes through the finish onto the stage with all of the elites. And I think it's called, I don't know what the French word is, but it's called Lanterne Rouge, I think. It's a red lantern, right?
Yeah.
It's the very last runner, right? The light that is on the end of the train that shows it at the end. And they're bringing the very last runner onto the stage with all of the elites, right? And so I feel like one of the very practical issues that UTMB has over here, and that's, you're mentioning Tim Tollefson in Mammoth. He lives in Mammoth. He is connected to the place. And what UTMB, what Ironman has done wrong, and what UTMB has done right in Chamonix, the Polettis who started UTMB, they live in Chamonix. They know their community there, right? But these race directors that have been running these races actually here in the US, they've stayed on, right? Shaz, who runs Canyons, I think Sarah is her name from Kodiak or so, right? They've been the race directors of these races, but they're not being elevated by the Ironman UTMB organizations that runs these events over here. And I think that's what's necessary, because we love the personal connection with our race director. The reason why Whistler blew up so much is because Gary, everyone knows and loves Gary, and he wrote something. If UTMB would have come and taken one of my race day events and I would have written about it, nobody would have given a crap, right? I mean, I'm a nobody in that regard, right? And so I think having visible race directors, or perhaps even above that, somebody who manages and communicates to the community, would really help the organization in positioning itself and saying, hey, no, actually, we are trying to be a good player here. And I don't know, maybe we make missteps, maybe we're lost cause, but I feel like having a person attached to their decision would really help.
I mean, obviously, Olympia Parks and Recs is going to be contacted by UTMB, let them know the economic development that would come by having UTMB presented the Low Backyard Ultra.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I could not comment on this because I signed an NDA, but they've been conversations.
Which is also the Low Backyard race is amazing and deceptively tough, because when you think of Olympia, you're not thinking the mountains. You're not even thinking the rolling hills of Seattle. Like I get so much hill workout just walking my neighborhood, but man, that forest in the middle of Olympia is tough.
And I know. And for this coming March, we just announced a 12-hour race, so we'll add a 12-hour option. So I'll expect you back down there at the starting line in the coming March. Well, Jack, we've talked about a lot of things, and I don't know. Did you read Doug Meyer's book? Doug Meyer from Run the Alps. He has a really good book on UTMB. And the only reason I'm bringing up that book is that I'm talking about the intro where he references, I don't know, a famous US president quote or something about being in the arena, the man in the arena, and this idea that in the end, it counts that you show up, right? And you show up for your races as a race director, you show up for your podcast in bringing the community together. And that's what's important. You yourself saying the improvements you're making with the Seattle Running Club's races in focusing on improving the accessibility of our races. And I think that is sort of what matters, is showing up and doing the best that we can. And yeah, I think you have shown that, and I'm glad that you are not just doing that for races, but also for your personal races, and you actually got your 200-mile finish.
I appreciate it. Yeah. No, I did not read that book. I'll look that one up. For sure.
It's a really good book that gives you a good overview. And I think he, as an American living in Germany, it gives you sort of an idea of, he translates and interprets a lot of sort of French cultural thinkings to us, where we're sort of from the outside in, not really understanding. I think we've sort of reached a good place. What do you feel like? Do we feel like we need to talk about anything else?
Are we skipping over one topic, or that's fine with me if we do?
I'm trying to figure out how to approach it.
Yeah, no, I understand, and it's a tough topic. And look, I'll say it right here. Both you and I were at the U.S. Trail Running Conference.
Yeah.
I've been there 2 years in a row. I think you've been there a few more years than that. It's been fortunately local for us in Mukilteo, Washington. And for those that follow Alison Desir on social media, or even other runners, there definitely was some unfortunate tension and unfortunate occurrences at that conference. And I know you and I talked about this before we recorded, that, how many times do we need two white people on the same screen talking about this? This is, we we haven't done enough in inclusion, where we are two white people sitting here. I think you even said that on our podcast, like, there was a third screen with a third white person talking, and so I think we, I'm talking about community and talking about inclusivity in my races, and even just talking about building a community is like, well, what community are we building? Because our community we're building is not diverse, unfortunately. It does not represent the demographics of our country, of our world, of even our city. And there's a lot of work to be done. And, again, like I said, I did a lot as race director for Seattle Running Club for our races, but I don't think I did enough. I was lucky to have some groups show up without me even inviting them. There was a group from Tacoma called Latinx in Motion, and they brought 11 people to our races, and one of the people ran, I think, the whole series, and I didn't know that they were coming. And because one, I never even heard of the group, and two, I didn't reach out to them and invite them. Our clubs has been talking with Black Girl Run. We've had some conversations just in how to be more inclusive. Our club, 200 something members, is not diverse either. And so, like, we're all looking at, at least those that, and look, I think Allison said this, if you don't want to do the work, don't do the work. It's fine, but don't say you want to do the work and don't do it. Mm. And I think the people on my board at Seattle Running Club, I'm back to being vice president of the board again. I was vice president a few years ago and stepped away to do the race directing, and now I'm back as vice president. And I truly believe that people on our board want to do the work, and because it's not that we want to present that we're diverse, we actually want to be diverse, because I know my background. I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in West Los Angeles. I went to a very diverse high school. The teams I were part of, my cross country and track teams, I was one of the few white kids on the team, like, even in cross country. And I joked with Allison about this, because, like, reading her book, Running While Black, it's a great book, and I do recommend anyone reading it. Everyone should read it. But I joked with her that her experience of running cross country and my experience of running cross country are two different things. She's a Black woman from New York. I'm a white man from Los Angeles, and her experience was cross country was the all white team. She there was no Black people on the team. My experience in Los Angeles running cross country was I was one of the few white people on the team. Like my junior year, a lot of people got. We had a really bad football coach, and a lot of our track runners that were on the football team did not want to play for that coach. And so my cross country coach, may he rest in peace, Bruce, he recruited them to come out and run cross country. And so we had people that were typically running 200, 400 meters, 100 meters even, coming out and running cross country, running 3 miles of cross country. And it was awesome. And that was my experience, was a super diverse running community, distance running community. And it's not, at least my experiences here in Seattle, it's not. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it is work. It is not easy. One thing I will share with you, that I expressed some opinions to Terry, the head of the trail running conference, after the conference, about what happened and moving forward, how we need to build a community. And I've brought this up many times to many people, is we need to stop using Black people Latinx people, Indigenous people, Asian people, queer people solely on inclusion panels. When we do conferences and we have multiple panels and their expertise is inclusion and not their actual expertise, and their expertise is inclusion because they live it. They live that every day, So yes, that is their expertise, but they have other expertise too. Why are our panels outside of the inclusion panels not inclusive? Why, aren't there Black people on our race directing panels, on our volunteer panels, on our climate? And why aren't there Indigenous people on our climate and sustainability panels? Because we've seen this year after year up here in the Pacific Northwest and throughout, Canada and California, we have a forest fire issue, yes, because of climate change, but also because we refuse to talk to Indigenous people and learn from them the centuries, the millenniums of how to treat the land that we're on. And we need to be more inclusive, and also, why have all men on a panel? You have women on the panels too. Women are, if they have expertise in what we're talking about, they should be on that panel, and it does not have to be solely an inclusion panel. And that was how, and I know Terry was very open to that part of the feedback, and he was very open to a lot of the feedback I gave him about what took place at the conference. And so, I did want to share that. And I think that's one of our biggest issues right now when we talk about inclusion and building a community. If Black people, if Latinx people, if Asian people, if queer people feel that we solely want to talk to them and include them for the sake of inclusion and not because of who they are and what they have accomplished, that's our problem right there.
Yeah. That puts the focus on the real problems and the real work that needs to be done. And the whole kerfuffle around UTMB then becomes a joke and a microscopic blip on the radar, right? Because I think this is the hard work. This is the work that really truly pays off. And it's a really, really challenging work because, as you started off saying, as a race director, you've done some things, but are we patting ourselves on the back? I mean, we do have to celebrate incremental steps, but there's also so much more work that needs to be done, right? And I mean, I, as a race director, I walk away from this conference, panel after panel after panel, challenging me to do the work and compounding, right? Not individually, but compounding. It's exhausting, right? Because you, as a race director, you want to put on a fun event, but you, as a race director, are challenged to change the world. And that combination is really, really tough to set out, right? That doesn't mean that it can't be done. And I'm not making excuses for myself. I'm a white man. I certainly can do a little bit more, right? But it is a really challenging place to, well, perhaps that's our privilege as white men. Perhaps we need to do the work, right? Perhaps we need to actually take our privilege and not be silent in a room and actually speak up and do a little bit of the extra work, because all of the people that have been trying to do this extra work feel they've been left alone. They've been fighting all their lives, right? And now there's a little bit of extra pressure put on us, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, it's so hard. Perhaps we need to embrace the challenge and say, yeah, we need to do better. Yeah. Thank you for sharing this, and thank you for sort of bringing this up. It's been sitting on my mind. I have lots of conversation around it. And as you said, right, what's my role as a white man of speaking up? At what point am I an ally? At what point am I just sort of taking advantage of a situation or not coming with the right perspective, with the right solution, or even just trying to take advantage of a a stir in order to create some attention for myself, which is really absolutely not the focus and the idea here. I think it's important to have these conversations. Jack, go ahead.
Oh no, no. I just wanted no, thank you. This was a great way to spend my morning. It's always weird when you're recording a podcast because like I grew up. We grew up before podcasts. We grew up with radio, right? And so you listen to people on the radio, and it's that moment in time only. So like as we're recording now, it's like I say morning. I say like when I'm recording, it's a Sunday afternoon. It's like no, the person listening to this is going to be like a Thursday at 4 p.m. when they're driving home or on a run or something. It's like I don't make my stuff evergreen.
Well, perhaps you don't make it evergreen because by saying good morning, but I think the things that you talked about, our passion for running, our belief in running and running in community as a way of making ourselves better and making our world better place, that is evergreen, right? Our belief that we need positive energy. We can't despair, right? We need to find this place where we can get excited about the work that lies ahead. And I think you sharing your passion for running, that is evergreen content. Doesn't matter if somebody hears this on a commute home or while they're out running, right? I think your success in being able to get yourself a buckle at a 200-mile race, right? I mean, that will motivate people to go out. And so I think I'm thankful that you came on the show and shared your story a little bit. Before you go, tell folks where they can connect with you, how they can reach out, and where to sign up for your Bridal Falls race, your last one as race director.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't post much on social media, but you can find me on Instagram is the best way at JM Rosenfeld. So it's my last name, Rosenfeld. You can find me there. I think most recently I did have some posts about my race. I had like my whole race report. Yet Instagram doesn't let you like give you a character limit, so like I had to put it in multiple comment threads. It was annoying. And you can find me on our podcast, Beer on the Run. Me and Clint Welch host a mostly weekly show these days. But it's me and Clint having a beer and chatting with a guest. They don't necessarily drink, but we do, and we have fun, and the goal of that show is just to get to know someone. It's not necessarily a gear talk and this is kind of like this show. Like we didn't talk gear at all. Like, you don't know what shoes I wore, if I even wore shoes. I did.
No, it's been even more impressive.
I
spent also kind of crazy.
I spent 4 years wearing Luna sandals only. So
oh my gosh,
I switched back to shoes recently. So Beer on the Run podcast, find us there, and then race directing. So Seattle Run Club. If you go to bridle.seattlerunningclub.org, you can find Bridle Trails. It is the second Saturday of January 13th. It starts at 3 p.m. And there's actually a really cool story about the history of that race. I'll say very quickly, but it's 3 p.m. middle of January. And we have 5-mile loops up to 50K plus some relay races. So 5, 10, 15, and 30-mile races. And then there's a 2-person relay and a 6-person relay. The origin of that race is before Seattle Run Club. We've taken it over. But it's bridle trail. So it's horse trails. And it's in Kirkland. And a woman in the riding community who also enjoyed trail running was diagnosed with breast cancer. And her friends, as she was going through chemo and going through a lot of suffering, her friends wanted to suffer with her. And these were other riders and not runners. So they put on a 50K in the middle of January at night on her favorite trails to ride on. And that's the origin of that race. So it's kind of cool. I don't think that's written down anywhere. I just learned this from the state park ranger.
Nice.
Last year at midnight, as it was pouring rain on us and we were cleaning up, she told that story. So I wanted to relate that story as well. But yeah, in terms of affordable 50Ks, it's super affordable. I don't have the price in front of me, but probably $100 for 50K. You can't beat most places can't beat that. Let's put it that way. But no, it's a giant party at the turnaround or at the end of every loop. It's a giant party. So come out, hang out with us in the middle of the winter. Hopefully we have a non-rainy year, a non-muddy year, but who knows?
Who knows? It is the Pacific Northwest in January, so better plan for everything. Jack, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.